of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and I want you dressed at all times, or it's my boot up your ass. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by comic book extraordinaire, Andrew Williams. Andrew, are you ready to talk about this movie?
I am. This is a weird one, but I'm excited to talk about it.
It is. I mean, it's based on a comic. It fits our premise, but it's not our typical superhero caper. But it does deal with, supernatural superhero type elements. We're gonna jump into it. We're gonna talk all about this movie. Tell me real quick though, what's your history with this movie? I assume you've seen it before this week, right?
I have. I probably saw this in theaters. This would have been 2003, summer of 2003. So I feel like that was a point. My sister was probably about to go to college. So my family was going to the movies. It was kind of a big thing we did. So I feel like we definitely saw this. And this is a big hit with some members of my family. I know my mom and my sister really like this. And I've definitely seen it multiple times over the years. I hadn't revisited it recently before watching it for the show in some time. But saw it in theaters, I'm fairly certain. And yeah, it's definitely been in and out pretty much ever since. So
your mom is a big fan. Does she send us an email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com? Can we read her thoughts on this episode?
I don't think she did. I don't know if my mom pays attention enough to know I have a podcast.
You should you should text her and just be like, Mom, what is your favorite character in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? And see if she responds.
She'll tell you it's Sean Connery.
Well, I want to see. Will she be like, "Oh, it's of course the Dreamboat, my man, Sean Connery"? Will she get send us like an interesting? Okay, ask her. Let's see if she texts us back before we're done recording.
All right, I'm doing it now.
All right, I have seen this movie before. I saw it in theaters. I saw it with my dad. I remember pretty distinctly, and we had a good time. It was for me my introduction to a lot of these characters. These classic characters from literature. A lot of them were new to me. My dad knew all of them, and we had cool talks afterwards of him kind of catching me up on all these characters, and definitely got me interested in reading some of that old stuff. So from that perspective alone, we'll just kick off the hashtag Positivity Podcast. Even though this movie isn't the biggest hit, not everybody's seen it, I gotta think, along with the comic, it got people interested in some classic literature, which, that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I know there's definitely books that just from the comic to the movie and all of that, I was never looking up, King Solomon's Mines on my own. It wasn't a book that I was like, in junior high school, like, hey, Mom, go find me some H. Rider Haggard. Like, go look for some books there. But yeah, so just that kind of push towards some of these kind of icons of classic literature. I mean, this pulls from Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Bram Stoker, Arthur Conan Doyle, Ian Fleming, Herman Melville, Oscar Wilde, Robert Louis Stevenson. Like, there's so many things that are here.
They could have called the team Public Domain Defenders or something like that.
Defenders of the public domain. Because it really is. It's pulling a lot of stuff from there. And in some cases, not from there. Stuff that's just meant to be allusions to other stuff. But yeah, it's very clearly... They get a little fast and loose with it there, but yeah. So at bare minimum, I think it definitely pushed people towards some of that classic literature. I know it worked. I know it did for me. So
the movie was released July 11th of 2003, right in the middle of summer. Big blockbuster plans for this movie. It has a budget of $78 million. At the box office, it brings in $179 million. Not a smash hit, but it's definitely making a profit. Doing well for the studio, maybe not quite as well as their expectations had hoped. And critically, it is not well received. It holds just a 17% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It is pretty hard to be below 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. Once you cross that line, you're doing something. We've only had a handful of those, even on our show.
Yeah, I mean and this is not just a movie that wasn't a hit with critics. I mean, the creators spoke pretty harshly about it. The cast and crew have all kind of not said it was a great experience. This is just not a movie that afterwards anybody seen. Nobody was having a good time making this movie. It sounded
Yeah.
like it. It really sounds like everybody was kind of really struggling to get through this. And yeah, it's definitely it's such a unique looking film. We'll get into it more, but just there's so many. It's just a very strange movie. Like, not strange in a bad way, but just like there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's like, wow, like this is kind of different.
It really is. It stands out, and not for like, horrible reasons. It's not like,
Right.
The Rock's character in Scorpion King, and that's all you remember about that movie. It's nothing like that. It does have a distinct feel to it, kind of like a little bit Indiana Jones, a little bit James Bond, and on top of that, just classic characters from literature that you just don't typically see on the big screen, and the end result is definitely unique.
I mean, this is a movie where Sean Connery plays Alan Quartermain. Like, that's insane on its own. Like, just on a base level. Like, the fact that that's a thing that happened in 2003, no less. Like, of all the things in the world at that time, it's amazing that that's the one that somehow got through.
I do love the idea of a movie coming out in 2003 where, like, that's the pitch. Like, guys, kids, are you listening? Sean Connery, your dad's favorite actor, he's playing Alan Quartermain, your favorite character that you all know. The movie is written by James Dale Robinson, who is primarily a comic book writer, but has dabbled in TV and film and crossover media.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, his career, I think, is most prolific as a comic book writer, which kind of seems like it'd be a good fit for a comic adaptation like this.
You would think. James Robinson is actually responsible for one of my favorite comics of all time, which is Starman, which was one of the legacy series that kind of spun out of Zero Hour, the character of Jack Knight specifically. Starman is a classic Golden Age superhero, part of the Justice Society during that original surge of superheroes in the 40s. But in 1994, during what was called Zero Hour, which was one of DC's endless crisis events, this time having kind of Parallax at the center of it, we were introduced to the son of the original Starman, Jack Knight. And he was created by James Robinson. He created the character and wrote a pretty stellar 80-issue series during which Jack appeared in a few other places, but by and large only appeared in that book. And since that book ended, has not really appeared anywhere since. It's kind of a very rare thing in comics for a character to kind of come out, have a following, and then kind of disappear. Apparently part of that is the fact that James Robinson and Tony Harris own part of the character, so if they want to use them, they have to pay them. And we know how those companies are. But I love that book. If you're ever looking for a fun, not always fun, sometimes heavy, but legacy superhero story with a kind of definite 90s twist on it, not in like a weird way, but I love that book. I think they actually just put out a compendium of the first half of it.
And that's Starman?
So Starman, yes. Starman by James Robinson. But Jack Knight, the character, but I love that book. So, I mean, yeah, he's definitely a guy that has a certain flair, and you think if you're making a movie based off a comic, especially at the time, you would think that's a strike. Or not a bowling strike, not a strike like in baseball.
Well, it could be
I'm
the
mixing
pitcher.
my sports metaphors in a terrible way.
It could be the pitcher throwing a
but,
strike, and then it still works.
Right.
Because pitchers want to get strikes.
Yes,
if you're a batter, you don't want to strike.
The rails. If you're a bat,
you want the ball in the strike zone.
There we go. You want it in the strike zone, and you want him to swing at it.
Okay.
For the extra edge, but no.
So
What a terrible set of illusions, but. Yeah, I know he's done a little bit of television since then. I think he did some episodes of maybe Stargirl, which makes sense because that pulls a lot from the stuff he and Jeff Johns did with Justice Society, things like that. So yeah, it kind of felt like it was like a one and done really for him in films. I don't actually know. He's got a couple of other films out there, I think, but but yeah, it's this was kind of his first big high profile thing, and didn't really do anything after that.
Speaking of, didn't really do anything after that. This movie is directed by Stephen Norrington. Now, at the time, he was a hot director in Hollywood. He directed Blade in 1998, which was a massive hit, especially for an R-rated movie, very important movie in this genre. And a few years later, directs this, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Huge movie, huge cast, lots of big expectations. And it doesn't go too well. Like I said, it doesn't make as much money as they hoped. And there's a lot of stories, especially from Sean Connery, about their experience making the movie. And they don't speak very highly of its director.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not a coincidence that he hasn't directed a feature-length Hollywood film since this movie. His name gets attached to projects all the time, but for whatever reason, they never seem to come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard. He was attached to the endless attempts at rebooting The Crow for a long time. I've heard that he was supposed to do some original projects. I don't know, he was originally set to redo the Clash of the Titans remake that eventually got done by Louis Leterrier, and it just feels like he's that guy that's out there, and they kind of know who he is, but just doesn't feel like anybody's willing to take a chance on him. And it's weird to think, though, that like for a lot of people, Blade is the beginning of the superhero renaissance in a lot of ways. They think Blade kind of sets the stage for things like Spider-Man and X-Men. And that can be debated. I'm not going to dive into that here, but like Blade is still in that regard pretty important in that it brings this comic book stuff back to the forefront, showing that you can kind of take it seriously and it can kind of be a profitable adventure. And Blade is, it's very important. It's definitely not something that should be lost in the shuffle, even if X-Men and Spider-Man are definitely the ones that kind of kick off the superhero renaissance. And to see him go from that to this, again, based off the original comic, which has got kind of a more harder edge, it definitely made sense to me. Being like, all right, let's get this guy here.
I mean, so far, on paper, everything makes sense.
Comic book writer, comic book director, I mean, what could go wrong?
Let's jump into what we got on film. At the dawn of the 20th century, a world war seems imminent as conflict spreads across the countries. A mysterious character, simply called M, recruits a team of gifted individuals to unite against the terrorist known as the Phantom. Just as the team of extraordinary characters begin to bond, they learn of a spy within the group. Once M reveals that he is in fact the Phantom himself, the impervious Dorian Gray reveals himself to be the traitor and escapes with enough resources to recreate the supernatural abilities of the team. Now the remaining members of the League, Alan Quatermain, Captain Nemo, Tom Sawyer, Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Harker, and the Invisible Man, seek to put an end to M's plan of creating a world of super terrorists. What an epic plot we have on our hands, Andrew.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. A lot of characters that are all meeting each other for the first time. A lot of people being introduced on the big screen for the first time in a long time.
Twists, turns, betrayals. Globe-trotting story.
Weird, crazy technology. Actually, one of the things I love is that Wikipedia describes this as a diesel punk superhero film.
That.
And I just think that diesel punk is an amazing way to describe it.
So
I know that's like
specific.
a thing. I'm not trying to I know it's like steam. It's like, the follow to steampunk is diesel punk. But
And it's just because of Nemo's ship, right?
Nemo's ship, yeah. I assume. And then kind of the technology that M's coming up with in the time
like
period.
the tank and
kind of
assault rifles? Okay, just...
before, it's a good while before we end up with those things. So, but yeah, a lot of Nemo's tech is probably where that comes from. But anyway, yeah, it's a wild plot. Like I said, we're in Africa, we're in Europe, we're in back up north, we're everywhere.
Well, let's start with the cast of this movie. Specifically, the best casting and best performance of the film. We like to recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond with their performance that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film. We will recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I am going to go ahead and give this... I thought about this for a while. I'm giving it to Jason Fleming as Dr. Henry Jekyll / Edward Hyde, because I think he's balancing that pretty well. He's got obviously the two different sides of that he's playing, and he plays both. Obviously, the Hyde side is a little blown up there with the CG and all of that, or is that prosthetics? I don't know.
It goes back and forth. It does a lot
Yeah.
of practical shots, which I definitely appreciated.
Yeah, but he has to play both sides of it, and he gets a bit of an arc throughout the film, a bit of like, because at the start of this, Jekyll and Hyde are definitely meant to be at odds. They are, Jekyll is afraid of Hyde. Hyde's trying to intimidate Jekyll into transforming more often. But at the end of the film, they kind of really start to find a bit of a groove as a pair. They end up, when the submarine gets attacked, it's Hyde that's able to kind of take charge and save the ship from sinking. And at the end of the film, when they're in their big final showdowns, again, they're working together. They're making it happen. And I think Jason Fleming just gets a bit more to bite into here with that than a lot of other people do. And I think he runs with it. Obviously, Jason Fleming, I know him from a bunch of stuff. Obviously, the early Guy Ritchie films, Snatch, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. He's great in those. His brief turn as Azazel in X-Men First Class, where he was all done up in red.
I know. I was watching the show.
I don't think he said a single word.
I was watching the movie with a friend of the show, my wife, and she pointed that out. She's like, "You recognize him?" I was like, "No, it's Azazel from X-Men." I'm like, how in the world would I? I don't see it. I believe it because I see his name in the credits.
Either, but yeah. Otherwise, I really like that he gets to kind of dive into that because he's definitely one of the characters that kind of has an arc. A lot of people here are presented as a lot more static, not necessarily in a bad way, but they don't really.
They're established already. They're kind of at the end of their adventures. Yeah.
Like Quartermain is obviously somebody towards the end. Nemo is kind of already himself, that sort of stuff. So with Hyde and Jekyll, you get kind of that dual nature of it. And I think Fleming does a really good job with it. So Jason Fleming, Mark Strong Award winner.
Fantastic. I love it. He is definitely playing two distinct characters. That is two different performances, which, of course, given the character, but it's not like we talked about. Hyde is sometimes CG when it's necessary, but a lot of times it's still him giving a performance, and they do a lot of forced perspective and kind of comp him in to show that he's much larger than everyone else, and he's got these big, like, Popeye type prosthetics to make his forearms all huge and stuff. But it is still him giving it a performance and being a beast. And then, like, the first time he shrinks down and you see him as Dr. Jekyll, like, he's like scared and exhausted and just completely changes, a completely different character. And he, struggled to kind of regain and come to terms with the beast he has inside. It's classic, Jekyll and Hyde stuff, but he plays both sides very well. I think it's an excellent choice for a Mark Strong Award winner. I'm going to go a different direction, but there's quite a few number of good performances in this.
Yeah.
I am going with Tony Curran as Skinner, probably mostly known as the Invisible Man to the audience because he is the man in this movie that is, in fact, invisible. For now, I want to talk about his performance, but those effects that they do is my favorite part of the movie. He looks incredible, especially for 2003. But the reason he's getting my Mark Strong Award is because, in a way, we never even see him. But it's not quite only a voice performance. He's Invisible Man. Most of the time, you're just hearing his voice. But he does something, I guess, out of courtesy. He puts some makeup on his face so people can see there's a person there. They can see him emote and they can talk. So for the most part, you're just seeing his head, but it's covered in white makeup. He's got gloves on, a trench coat, and everything else, and wearing sunglasses because, black holes for eyes is pretty creepy. And just with that much performance visible, he makes a very memorable character. He is very funny. I hesitate to call him like the comic relief of the group because I think that would kind of sell it short. He's not just there making jabs. He's got a fully realized character in his own right, but he also happens to be very funny, which I appreciate. And so the fact that he creates this fully realized character, this kind of sarcastic guy who's always kind of poking at everybody and giving everyone grief, but you never actually see him, I think is a pretty impressive feat for an actor. So gotta tip my hat to him. Hand him out that Mark Strong Award, baby.
No, I very much agree. He's got kind of a huge uphill battle, obviously, that nobody else really has to deal with because they're all visible. But he's he's making the most of it. Like, obviously, there's a couple of scenes where you can very much tell that, like, they've covered his whole head with the makeup, so that we're kind of getting the most. But, like, there's lots of scenes where, like, he takes the stuff off, and you can see that the makeup's only on part of his face, and it doesn't look that out of place. And so it's very well done. It's very, especially for 2003.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, by today's standards, I'm sure you could say it looks a little dated, but I think it looks really good. I think it's a cool effect. I think some of the stuff they do with him towards the end, like when he gets burned in the final fight and things like that, where like you're seeing all of these pieces and things, I think that stuff is just really well done, makes it unique, makes it different. Because normally when you do Invisible Man performances, they're just invisible. Like it's just the guy, you just never see them. And so with this one, they actually try to add these layers and make it a little bit different and kind of try to address like, well, yeah, if the Invisible Man's standing out in the snow, you're probably going to be able to see him because the snow is going to be falling on him, stuff like that. And I think that makes it definitely a notable performance. And Tony Curran is like, I remember him most notably from an episode of Doctor Who where he plays Vincent Van Gogh. And there's a very prominent, powerful scene where he comes forward to the present.
Hang on. The painter?
Yes.
Is it Vincent Van Gogh? That's how you say it? It's not Van Gogh?
It's not Van Gogh. Any joke about Van Gogh is wrong.
It's just a dumb American thing, just not looking up how to actually pronounce it? And you're hanging your hat on this. It's Van Gogh.
It's Van Gogh.
Okay. I've got nothing else to add. I just thought it was Van Gogh.
the scene in the show is very poignant. It's been pointed out by many people as one of their favorite scenes in like the entire run of the show. But you know, Van Gogh throughout his life was very troubled, and so he takes him to the future to see how he's viewed. And so it's this. So Tony Curran plays Vincent Van Gogh, and he's in the present, and he's seeing this massive tribute to his work. And it's almost more than he can handle because the idea that the pain of his life would be seen so well later, and he would have this reputation as being this fantastic, amazing artist who was not held back by his limitations. It's just a very, very powerful scene. And Bill Nighy plays like the curator who gives this big speech about it. And it's definitely worth checking out. But it's a very powerful performance from him there too. So he's fantastic pretty much anywhere he goes. And that was only a couple of years after this, but definitely a good choice here. He's definitely comic relief, like you said, feels reductive, but it is kind of his job. He's the snarky one. He's really kind of the kind of more, I guess, rough around the edges of the group. And he's very effective at it. So I again, well deserved.
Let's talk about our lead of the movie, Sean Connery himself, the legend,
the man.
Plays Alan Quartermain.
I mean, what is there to say about Sean Connery? He's Sean Connery. I mean, he's James Bond. He's Henry Jones Sr. He's worked with every single director on the planet. He's worked with almost every single famous actor on the planet. He's
no stranger
Sean Connery
to a team of super people. I mean, he starred in the Avengers.
Yes.
Yeah, the one from the 90s is based off of a TV show that's unrelated to Marvel Comics, but at any rate, yeah. I mean, he's Sean Connery. He's being Sean Connery. He shows up. He hits the beats. He's got the voice and, dare I say, the gravitas. And that's exactly why they hired him to be the centerpiece of this movie. Just a nice, steady hand that's going to bring people into the box office to see it. It's going to get Andrew's mom to take the kids to go to the theaters, and it succeeded in doing just that. Mom watch. Any text back? Have you heard back from Mom yet?
No, I texted my sister because she also loves this movie.
Oh, okay.
My sister says her favorite character is 100% Mina, but agrees with the assumption that my mom's favorite character would be Sean Connery.
Why aren't we asking your mom? Is she in bed? Is it too late?
I texted. She has not responded.
Okay, you did ask her as well. Okay, all right.
I did ask her.
I'm glad we got the backup from the sister, though.
But we got the backup from my sister saying it would be Alan Quartermain. So, but yeah, I mean, this is, that, and, not to, hashtag positivity podcast, but this movie kind of did get saddled with the reputation of retiring Sean Connery, essentially, because...
Well, yeah, what a reputation.
He notably passed on The Matrix playing the architect, which, I think we've joked about that before, but imagine Sean Connery's voice giving the architect speech. It would just be so strange. But also notably passed on Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, or some Lord of the Rings role. Apparently part of his signing onto this movie, despite kind of quote unquote not getting it, was passing on those other two roles that would have made him a bunch of money. And so he kind of signed on to this, was kind of like, it feels weird, but I'm going to do it. Didn't have the best experience. And, you can point to one movie, but like if you look at his late 90s filmography, there was definitely some diminishing returns happening there. And I think this really
like
is
the Avengers.
The Avengers, stuff like that. So I think this is more just kind of like he finally kind of got to the point where he's like, you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. And so he just kind of was like, all right, I'm going to move on. So.
And that's not how we would have said it, Andrew. How would we have said that?
I've moved on.
That's pretty good. We should say R.I.P. Sean Connery did
Yes.
pass away last year.
I mean, obviously a fantastic actor. I
Yeah.
mean, he's still for many people the bar for James Bond.
How about you? Is he number one on your Bond list?
He's up there. Craig, I think, gets some recency bias just because he was definitely there. But like some of his early Bond movies are just like Goldfinger is just so good. It's like he's so good as the character. You never question it. He's just there. But like even moving beyond that, even some of his later stuff, like I mean, The Untouchables, he's fantastic. I love Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I mean, I partly mostly because of his rapport with Harrison Ford, who I think is only 12 years younger than him or something like that. Like their age difference is not nearly enough.
I was doing the math watching this because it reminded me of Indiana Jones. He's kind of got that look and feel to it, and I was like, oh yeah, he played his dad. I'm like, but Harrison Ford is also old as hell. Like, how did that work?
It's just the curse of Sean Connery looking 70 ever since he was like 40. But
he does. I mean, he is old in this movie. You know what? He's approaching 70, early 70s. He was right around there.
I mean, this was 2003, and he was born in 1930, so over 70, 73.
Okay, good math. Checks out. Sean Connery has always spoke in a distinctive manner. It's not just that he has an accent. It's Sean Connery, right? But it definitely got more exaggerated over the years, right? Am I crazy? Like he wasn't James Bond with this exaggerated of a speaking pattern, right?
No, I think and I think it depends. I think if it's something where he's kind of, performing a certain way, I think he definitely would, lean into it a little bit more. I mean, he is Scottish, so I think we're hearing a little bit more of the unchecked Scottish accent here. And maybe it's age. Who knows? I mean, it could be any number of things, but there's definitely, like, if you watch his James Bond, even The Rock, like, it doesn't sound nearly as pronounced there as it does here. And The Rock is only like 7 or 8 years before this. So I think it's definitely a choice that he kind of goes with. Like, he's just like, you know what?
I know what you want. I know what the people want.
Yeah, he's like, the people want me to say Sean Connery stuff in a Sean Connery voice. So, but yeah, he's Sean Connery. What, like, he's, is this the greatest performance in the history of cinema? No, but he's bringing, like you said, he's Sean Connery as Alan Quartermain. I'm like, I feel weird, like, putting it that way, but like, that really is, you know what you're getting at that point. It's late stage Sean Connery, and he's doing Sean Connery stuff. He's, not really phoning it in. I think he has some scenes where he kind of does look like he's into it. But yeah, it's Sean Connery. What more is there to say?
Nasiruddin Shah plays Captain Nemo. Another performance I very much like. I did consider him for the Mark Strong, as well as Jason Fleming for Jekyll and Hyde, but he's one of the characters that comes on the screen fully formed, fully established. He doesn't have much of an arc. He is just kind of awesome from the get-go, gets a few moments to shine throughout the movie, and I'm all about it. I love his look. I love the glorious beard that the man has. It's awesome. I'm immediately intrigued by this character. I love the performance. He has the biggest ship in film history, I think. Like, dwarfs the Titanic. It is absurd how big they make that ship. I can't say I'm familiar in this case with the source material of the character, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I have not read that, so I don't know much about him, but he just seems awesome. He's got some cool, like, fight scenes, some hand-to-hand combat. I'm not sure what he's known for, but
he gets gets some really cool stuff here. Like you said, he comes in, he's static. The only kind of development at all that he deals with is Ishmael gets killed, and that's his biggest moment. But like his biggest contribution is obviously he's the transportation. He's got a car before anybody has a car. He's got a submarine that can move faster than anybody's ever fathomed at this point. You know how many feet are in a fathom, Chris?
At least 74.
No, 6. Close. 6 feet in a fathom. But
okay, I was
that's your
wrong.
other lesson today, folks. Van Gogh, and they're 6 feet in a fathom. There you go, folks. But no, the tech he gets is very cool though. It's very unique looking. I'm not trying to say, like, I'm not trying to hype this up. I can't think of another movie or definite iteration of this character where I've seen anything like this. Like especially even like the tracking system they use, where it's this
Oh, it's
huge
so cool.
metal ornamental thing where like one is an LED that's got the guy in their phone. Like it's just this, it's one of those things where you look at me like work was put into this. Like people put effort into kind of designing the style and the look of Nemo's technology. And I think it's very cool. And his performance here is good. He's playing it pretty downplayed. Captain Nemo is definitely a character that is he's from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He's also in another one called the Mysterious Island is another story he's in. And he's has a big like he's hungry for vengeance in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like he's kind of a dangerous person and kind of an unhinged person at times. So the movie plays him a lot more straight. Like this is a guy who's got his ducks in a row. He's got it figured out. He knows what the score is and he's going with it. But he gets some awesome fights. Like he kind of, you're not really sure how he is in a fight at first. And then like in every single fight scene, he gets stuff to show off and you're like, wow, this dude's awesome. Like he's pretty great. And the performance is good. The actor is more notable as like an Indian film and stage actor. So that's more where his body of work lies. Not a whole lot of American performances or U.S. performances.
I mean, kudos to the
Hollywood
casting director.
performances.
You're making a movie about characters from all over the world, and you casted appropriately. I like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good move. And like even just a pass through his filmography, I was like, I recognize very few of these things. And the things I do recognize, I really haven't seen very much of. But he's still out there, still doing his thing. And, awesome.
Peter Wilson plays Dr. Mina Harker. Now, this is a vampire from Dracula lore and our only female on the league. And boy, does the movie let us know that. I feel like everybody just constantly giving her a hard time just because she's a woman, especially like when she's first introduced. But definitely holds her own against the men. Probably one of the more powerful members of the team. I really like what Peeta's doing here.
Yeah. As my sister pointed out, this is her favorite performance in the movie because she's Quartermain is initially very dismissive of her place. He talks a lot about women just getting on missions and being in the way. Basically, very much like you're only going to be a hindrance to us. You will never be of use. And she eventually, she gets this great line where she's being like held captive and she's like, God, I knew they'd do anything to protect you. And she's kind of like, that's your mistake, thinking I need them to protect me. And then she bites the dude in the neck and sucks his blood.
Hell yeah.
I was like, that's awesome. This is a bit of a change because in Dracula, Mina Murray originally, Harker later, is not a vampire. The whole end of the book is she gets lifted from Dracula's curse. So this is definitely something they're playing a little fast and loose with, but who cares? Doesn't bother me. But yeah, she gets some good stuff to sink her teeth into, literally. See what I did there, Chris? Sink her teeth into. It's a vampire pun.
Let's
cream of the crop.
Let's just stop the podcast and break this down. That's how you know a joke is good. Explain it.
So after explaining it, it's great. But no, I like what she's doing here a lot. Obviously, not a lot of credits to her name. Looking through it, I was kind of shocked that she hadn't done a little bit more. Obviously, the big thing felt like she was on La Femme Nikita for the main role for those 4 years it was on. So not a whole lot since then. But I gotta say, I love this performance.
Speaking of vampires, Stuart Townsend plays Dorian Gray. And I know this guy immediately from Queen of the Damned, where he plays the vampire.
Yes.
Let me put the bell on that. That's
Where he plays Tom Cruise.
Yeah, exactly. Tom Cruise the vampire.
Yes. Yeah, I obviously recognize him from Queen of the Dam. Not a whole lot of stuff since then I've seen. Looks like it's a lot of like...
I mean, Queen of the Damned and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. This guy peaked. He got 2 massive hits right there.
Two different kinds of immortal characters.
Yeah. Landmarks of American pop culture.
What more is there to do?
I perfectly cast as the traitor of the group, the guy that you can't quite trust, right? I mean, he's attractive fellow, but there's something sinister underneath. The man definitely has that look, especially with that little goatee he has going on.
Yeah, looks a little familiar. But no, yeah, because the movie kind of plays up him and Skinner as both kind of being the less than savory characters, the ones that you could potentially see as being up to something. And as the movie definitely tries to throw that onto Skinner first. And then ultimately it's revealed that Dorian is the actual spy, the mole, if you will. But yeah, like, it's almost too on the nose, because when the shoe drops, I'm kind of like, oh, well, of course it did. Of course you're the spy. You look like the spy. Like,
just goes to show you, sometimes it's the person you most expect.
Sometimes it's exactly who you think it is. But so obviously Dorian Gray from the original book by Oscar Wilde, he's very vain. He's very he lives this hedonistic lifestyle at times. And the end of the book kind of has him kind of coming to grips with that at times, sort of. So again, a great casting and a great portrayal of that idea. Obviously, this has to take place. I guess this is intended to take place after the book, or however that fits in. Who knows? But I'm not. I don't think Oscar Wilde's worried about it. So wherever he may be.
Speaking of this movie leading me to learn more about these characters, I actually just read up about this character recently. Let me tell you why. His whole thing, if I can summarize it real quick, is that he sells his soul to the devil, and in exchange, he no longer ages, and anything that affects him instead affects a portrait of him. So the portrait gets old instead of him. He gets to keep his youth and beauty. That's kind of the basis. And I just happened to be rewatching old Family Guy recently, from episode 1. Because it's at 30 seasons now, but I feel like that show used to be funny, right? Before it fell off. And that's true, but it's season 4, it already starts getting bad, turns out. So anyway, there is an offhand joke by Stewie where someone asked, a girl asked how she looks, and he goes, "How can I put this? In an attic somewhere, there's a portrait of you getting prettier," which is just a super convoluted joke about Dorian Gray. Instead of the picture getting uglier, it's getting prettier, implying that she is getting uglier. But at any rate, I was like, I don't get that joke. So I Googled it, and I found out it was a Dorian Gray reference. So literally a week ago, I just read up on this whole story of Dorian Gray, and then he shows up in this movie. And you know what?
He does.
Good thing I did read up on it, because the movie doesn't really explain this whole thing. It does kind of assume that you get the significance of the portrait. The portrait shows up at the end. It's ultimately his demise, but there was never a whole flashback or explanation as far as why that holds the key to his immortality.
No, there wasn't. And well, I guess spoilers for the plot of The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is well over 100 years old at this point. But
I was just about to check it out from the library.
The end of the book is him destroying the picture and essentially killing himself in the process. So again, how this is meant to fit in with the story, the original story, is anyone's guess, because they kind of shotgun that ending here where Mina shows him the picture. He doesn't even have to destroy it. Just showing it to him reverses it. And it basically trades off. The picture becomes normal and he withers away. But yeah, they don't really dig into that at all. So you're really kind of meant to just get that Dorian Gray is about, the story is called The Picture of Dorian Gray. But if you have no frame of reference, that's just a very strange thing.
We have Shane West as Tom Sawyer, which I get that this is all characters in classic literature, but for some reason, him turning up, I was like, really? We're fitting Tom Sawyer into this? Okay.
Yeah, he's not in the book. I'll say that. He's definitely not somebody that's from the original stories. Obviously meant to be the grown-up character from, you know, the book of the same name, but
Yet still playing like the
it's
kid of the group.
yeah, like still playing like the young, because you know that there's a bit of a father-son-esque relationship they sort of hint at between Quartermain and Sawyer, even though Quartermain could easily be like his great grandfather. um, but but yeah, he's a Secret Service agent from the U.S. that meets up with the League and ends up coming along for the ride. Quartermain gives him the seal of approval and is like, "You're in," and then just along on the adventure. I remember him specifically from this movie called Get Over It. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
But it's this 2001 kind of teen comedy that kind of spoofs A Midsummer Night's Dream, but like Ben Foster and Kirsten Dunst, Cisco shows up in it. Like, if you need to date the movie specifically, Cisco is an actor in the film. Zoe Saldana's in it, Mila Kunis, Colin Hanks, Martin Short's one of the characters. It's very strange. It's very much a stacked cast, if you will. But he plays like the douche in that movie. And that was my only frame of reference when I saw him here. And I was like, I don't like you as the hero. You're supposed to be the jerk. But yeah, he does fine here.
All right. Run, don't walk, folks. Go read Starman and go rent Get Over It.
Get over it. These are Andrew's hot recommendations.
Lastly, we have Richard Roxburgh as the Phantom. M also reveals himself to be Professor James Moriarty. He's playing. He's the good guy. He's the bad guy. He changed. What does there say about the performance? I don't even know how to talk about it.
He starts off as the man who forms the League, but it turns out the whole formation of the League was simply a plot for him to be able to steal the stuff he needed to be able to recreate their powers. So M was nothing but a facsimile to facilitate getting them all in the same place. Whereas the Phantom, who is based off of a couple of different things here, the main thing seems to be definitely pulling from a little bit of a Phantom of the Opera type thing. We got a scarred and disfigured face with a mask kind of covering it up. That to me was kind of what we were going for here. And then obviously he eventually reveals himself, because what happens is there's a sequence where the Phantom is like running away and someone says, like, go, run away, James. They call him James at one point. And I was like, well, that's a little obvious, but it's like here's the Phantom, James. And I'm like, all right. And then he's ultimately revealed to be the mastermind of the whole thing, who is Professor James Moriarty, who is Sherlock Holmes' nemesis. That's his thing. So they mentioned Reichenbach Falls here, which is from what was originally meant to be the last Sherlock Holmes story, where Holmes and Moriarty go over a waterfall together, and they're both supposed to seemingly perish. So he apparently afterwards got better, changed his identity, turned into the Phantom. Yeah, he's got a lot of stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things going on here, but I will say this to Richard's credit. He has now played Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes on different occasions, so he's played both sides of it.
Oh, look at that.
Also has played Dracula. This dude has done everything.
Good for you, Richard.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, and I think I feel like it'd be difficult for almost anyone to keep up with all the twists and turns this character makes. But yeah, he's the villain of the piece, and he's effectively conniving.
Well, let's jump into this movie, Andrew. Specifically, our favorite scenes in the movie, and we are, of course, going to start with the best scene of the movie. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene in the League of There's got to be a shorter way to say the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. This title is so long. I got to say all these words every single time. Do you have any abbreviation I can use, Andrew?
I believe you could go with something like LXG.
LXG? Whoa, that's going to catch on. Plaster that
That'll
on the
be hip.
posters. Put it on
That'll
the
be hip
VHS
with
cover.
all the kids.
LXG. That was all over. Look, okay. Hashtag Positivity
Everywhere,
Podcast.
folks.
Here we go. LXG. They tried to make it a thing, right? It was like, fetch. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I really don't like whenever studios try to force these little nicknames. It's like trying to force like a hashtag before that was even a thing. LXG. Yeah. The most prominent one I can think of that it's always annoyed me is Independence Day. Like,
ID4.
ID4. No one's going to call it that. No one has ever called it that. No one abbreviates it. Just say Independence Day. That's what it is. But yeah, I remember that VHS cover. It had like the cool like lenticular thing on the front so you could turn it back and forth and it blows up the White House. But yeah, real big letters across the top. ID4. And that doesn't even make any sense. How does that abbreviate Independence Day?
If only there were like a numerical representation of Independence Day that was like 2 whole numbers. That would have made life so much easier.
It would have, but that does not exist.
It doesn't. There is no way.
ID4 is the most logical. Just like LXG.
Yep. It's definitely a choice. But I remember that was the thing. And like, my mom would call it that. She'd be like, I'm going to watch LXG. You think we should watch LXG?
Said it?
And I'm like, it's not a thing. Mom, you're over 40. Stop it.
Look, I take it back. Your mom, number one fan of this movie and Sean Connery, if she's saying it, then it clearly caught on. Did you text her that? Hey, what's your favorite character from LXG?
I did.
Did you put LXG in the text?
I specifically put LXG.
Amazing. I love it. I take back this entire rant. That's amazing.
To Andrew's mom, who's your favorite character in LXG? I'll send you the screenshot when she responds, and you can put it on the Twitter or something.
I love that she saved in your phone as Andrew's mom.
That's how that was a joke as a kid. I had a lot of my brother and I both had friends that refused to call our parents like by anything except friend's mom. So it was Andrew's mom or Bobby's mom or whatever. Mm-hmm. So anytime now I just joke and I'm like, yeah, Andrew's mom. Sure.
So Andrew, what's the best scene in the movie?
I'm going to go with, this is one of the there's a few big action set pieces. I'm going with the whole sequence in Venice. So this is a part of the Phantom's plot is to sink the city of Venice. This is kind of the idea, the genesis of the first half of the film, and this is meant to basically start the World War, essentially. That's the intention here. So at the beginning of the film, they steal Da Vinci's blueprints of Venice, which have the layout of how it's all put together, and is basically used as the basis for them building this plan and using it as the precipice for what would be World War I, because we're before the World Wars in this point. But so basically, as they arrive, they've got this big, all right, let's fan out, let's find the bombs, let's do all this, and they pull a real Watchman on them, boom, the bombs start going off. So they're too late, they think. So this leads to a car chase where they're trying to get ahead of this domino effect because they kind of figure out, well, if we stop the next building from falling before the one before it falls, it won't have anything to stop it, and we'll be able to save the rest of the city. So you get a bunch of big action set pieces. You get Quartermain and Sawyer driving Nemo's car around, getting shot at by all these people. Mina goes full bat crazy, takes out a whole bunch of people going full vampire. You got Jekyll kind of struggling, not trying to be controlled by the monster. You got Dorian Gray being sufficiently douchey. And you got Nemo trying to make sure that this plan actually works. And you kind of get everybody doing their thing for the most part. And I just think it's a cool set piece. It's a unique location. I think it's a cool setup. And yeah, I think it all works for me.
Definitely a good chunk of the budget, I gotta imagine, went to that set piece. It's definitely one of the biggest ones in the movie. I love, we've got a team of characters here, and the movie is pretty good with its action scenes as far as giving everybody a job, using their unique abilities, separating them, and each having their own through line through the action scene. And this is no exception. I love in particular the bit where they're driving that car, that automobile. I don't think they ever give it a name, but the thing is it's like a ivory Batmobile. Like it's right, super long. It looks like a turn of the century Batmobile. It's pretty cool. I love the action scenes with that car. I love how it's like one of the first cars ever, and it can drive 90 miles an hour. Like it's a nice little car they got there. They started off strong.
They did, and so I think it's a cool set piece. It's the mix of things, but I think like the idea of Venice, obviously they're running through the channels, the canals, the streets of Venice, just being very close together, makes for a unique setup. I like that a lot. And for me, it's definitely a moment where I'm like, all right, I'm in. If this were 2 hours of this, more people would have seen it. Yeah, great scene.
I agree. Very fun scene. Very good action set piece. Not what I have written down as my favorite scene. I'm actually going with a different action scene of the movie. I think definitely the action and when this movie is most kinetic is when it is firing on all cylinders. It's whenever it's the most enjoyable. So my favorite one is the first action scene where the League has been united. They all kind of meet up like in this library. It's where they all meet each other. And then they get ambushed by the Phantom's men. And we have a big fight scene in this enclosed location where we get to see these characters' unique abilities for the very first time. They take out these henchmen with automatic rifles. This is also where we get introduced to the Invisible Man, which is another reason why it's one of my favorite scenes, because, I mean, it got my Mark Strong Award. I love the performance, but man, these special effects are incredible. I mean, especially for 2003. I can't stress that enough. The early 2000s are a very interesting time for effects in movies. We're transitioning from throughout the 80s and 90s, it is mostly practical, and they start using computers and CG to sort of enhance the look and do things that practical can't do, but kind of just bridge that gap. But you're still mostly relying on practical effects. Even Jurassic Park got some CG in there, but they also built a giant dinosaur. Like they're still relying on practical effects. And then as we move through the early 2000s, it reverses. And then by the end of that decade, CG becomes the standard and practical is more of a lost art, and it's not used as much because you can do so much with CG. It's an awkward transition period because definitely the ambition was there before the technology was there. And there's a lot of examples, we talked about several on our show, of early 2000s using way too much CG, and it does not hold up. In just a few years, that technology is outdated, and the movie itself becomes very dated.
Yes.
Now, in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, there is CG like that.
Yes.
The monster that Hyde fights at the end of this film, I would point to as being being very dated. But the Invisible Man, these effects are incredible, and they hold up, and they're CG. It's a crazy, impressive CG for the time. Mostly, the first thing you see is the Invisible Man putting on a big trench coat. And that's cool. He's invisible. You see a trench coat flying through the air, wrap around his shoulders. The cloth looks really good. It's awesome. But when he applies the makeup for the first time, it like blew my mind. He picked up the bowl with the powder, the makeup, and he kind of just splashes it on his face. And a face forms like before your eyes. This white face.
And it's
floating.
his face.
Yes.
Like it's Tony Curran's face. Like it's not just like a random CGI'd face. It's his face.
It's floating above the trench coat, and then he turns around and you see the back of the makeup. And it's that's such a simple thing, and I wouldn't think twice about seeing it today, I guess. I think that's cool, but the fact that it's 2003 was consistently impressing me. And like you said, inexplicably, there'll be like the next scene, and now the makeup is like his entire head. Obviously done so they can save on special effects and just have the actor there with makeup on his head. And then whenever it's CG again, it's like just his face. The transitions are obvious, but crazy cool special effects. I mean, man, if you've never seen this movie before, if you don't plan on watching it, Google this scene or just Google Invisible Man from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I am so impressed with what they did there. Dare I say, the original, the classic movie, The Invisible Man, has some groundbreaking special effects for the time. In that movie, the Invisible Man is wrapped in bandages, and he unbandages his head, and he's invisible. There's no head there, which was crazy impressive. Corridor Crew has a great video breaking down how they did that, but it's very insane how much work went into it. And this is like a modern version of that. In 2003, I don't remember my young me seeing this in theaters, how impressed I was, how much I was talking about it, but even watching it now years later, like I am fascinated by that special effect. I can't praise it enough. Let me get. I guess I should move on to the entire
scene. Back to the point. Yeah,
that is a big part of why I love the scene because it's our introduction to that. There's a bit of a problematic bit where before the fight breaks out, the Invisible Man takes a shot of whiskey, I guess, and you see it go down his throat. I'm like, wait a minute. You can see food and drink inside of him. Like you don't see it the rest of the movie. You're like, you just see like some floating I'm not gonna say it.
Well, to be fair, I don't think he eats or drinks anything the entire rest of the movie.
He's just he's starving all the time. Like that's just pointless.
Well, he's eating off screen. But no,
but
yeah,
he's gonna digest it. It's gonna be in a system. You'll see, like
yeah,
you know,
like, does it enter a certain organ and then it disappears from view?
once it's in like a stomach acid, like that.
Yeah, like once
it
it hits into the stomach, it like the throat's the only visible. I don't know. That's the question. That's now we're asking the hard questions.
Okay, let's move into the scene itself. One more thing on the Invisible Man, because my single favorite Invisible Man shot. This blew my freaking mind. Shooting breaks out, right? They get ambushed. They're shooting at him. The Invisible Man jumps up and starts running across the room. He's holding like a glass of water. The glass gets shot. It splashes on his face where the makeup is, and the splash washes off half of the makeup while he's running. It is such a cool visual effect. It happens in mere seconds. But the fact that you've got him running, you got this cool effect of the floating face, you've got glass explode, water washing it off while he's running across the camera. Oh, I love it. I mean, if we want to get real specific with my favorite scene, it's that shot. That alone is the coolest thing I saw in this movie.
4 seconds.
But the whole fight scene is great. Like this is where you get to see Dr. Harker become a vampire for the first time. She has a cool line he talked about earlier. You get to see Dorian Gray. I really like his reveal that he gets shot up with an assault rifle and he doesn't die. And the person that he kills that shot him, they fall to their knees. They grab at a shirt and rip a shirt down. And you see all the bullet holes slowly heal. And then like ash, like gunpowder, I guess maybe it is. Like it comes out of the bullet holes as they heal. Again, super cool special effect for the time. I was all on board. You got to see what all these characters do best. Your introduction to all of them. It's very well handled. Very fun scene. My favorite scene in the movie.
I agree.
You agree?
It's very cool. Scene? Like I agree it's your favorite scene. But no, I agree it's a very cool scene. Like it really is it's your introduction to everyone. You get to see Dorian, you get to see Nemo breaks out into his fight where, you know, he gets to show off his skills. Everybody kind of gets to do their thing in the moment. This is also our introduction to Tom Sawyer. He shows up and kind of gives them the edge after it looks like the Phantom has them cornered. Yeah, it's a cool sequence. It's like you said, you get your glimpse into every single person, and then you're off and running. And it's very effective at setting all that up and executing it. And it's one of the few, like, there's not a whole lot of big set pieces in the film. This is one of them, and it's very well executed.
In the very, very beginning of this movie, it's literally my first note. It's about the studio logo. It says 20th Century Fox, and then the logo transitions to be practical and like diegetic in the movie. The 20th Century Fox logo like turns into steel, and the camera pans down, and it's sitting on top of a building, and we just roll right into our scene. Andrew, that was pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I like that. Pretty cool.
Every movie should do that.
Every movie should do that.
I would have loved if, like, 45 minutes in the movie, they drive down that street again for some reason, and it's still the 20th Century Fox logo.
Oh, man. That would have been funny. No, yeah, it's a cool look. The movie has a very unique look to it. Like, obviously, you've got that turn of the century look
Diesel
to, like,
punk,
Europe.
as Wikipedia tells us.
To London and all of that. Obviously, the Africa stuff looks way different. Looks a lot more straightforward, but I like the idea that Quartermain has somebody he has tell the stories instead of him at this point, because he's so annoyed telling the stories about his life. He literally lets somebody else do it.
I love that scene. They're trying to track down Quartermain, and they walk up to the character we know his name is Nigel. And Quartermain, you can see Sean Connery like in the background. My favorite part about this is they're dressed exactly the same. Like, does Quartermain wear the same outfit every day? So the guy who tells the stories has to wear the same stupid brown vest. Like,
maybe he does. Who knows?
He could just change clothes. Just don't wear your usual getup, Quartermain, and nobody will recognize you.
Exactly. You dress like Alan Quartermain, people are going to realize it. It's like if Indiana Jones doesn't want to get noticed, just don't wear the jacket and the hat, man. Ain't no one going to recognize you.
Imagine Indiana Jones in like a t-shirt and jorts. New Balance sneakers with grass stains on them.
Maybe we'll find out summer 2023. But yeah, I do like the Quartermain introduction scene. I think it's a fun little action sequence where Connery gets to beat up some dudes.
I
have
love
some fun
that.
with it.
My favorite part about Sean Connery's action scenes in this movie is Andrew, for some reason, when the camera is behind Alan Quartermain, he becomes way more athletic. When the camera's behind him and you can't see his face, he's jumping over tables, he's doing flips. It's incredible.
It's a fantastic ability there.
That is Alan Quartermain's superpower. When you can't see his face, he gets 20 years younger. His head of hair is a little bit fuller, and he's very athletic.
If only that were true for all of us. But yeah, it's a cool little introduction sequence, and then he gets kind of roped into what's going on.
We learn a little bit about his backstory, that he's kind of,
Right.
much like the real Sean Connery after this movie, retires from being an adventurer, from what he's known for. And it doesn't get too much into like the tragic backstory area, but his wife is dead.
His wives are dead.
His wives.
He's buried 2 wives. He's buried multiple lovers at this point, and he does. It's not here, but they hint at it that he's got more tragic there as well.
His son. They mentioned that his son, is dead as well. But yeah, he does make it a point to say, "My dear, I've buried 2 wives and many lovers, and I'm in no mood for more of either." Because he just assumes every woman's hitting on him, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess when you reach a certain age as Sean Connery, you just assume.
Andrew's mom, everybody's mom.
Everybody's mom.
I'm waiting to be impressed. He is hamming up that accent. I wrote down so many lines of his. 'Cause I'm like, that is
Maybe he was just drunk the whole movie.
maybe. They really do cram a lot of literature references into this. I mean, a lot. Captain Nemo, his right hand man is Ishmael, which is from Moby Dick. That's Captain Ahab's guy, if I'm getting my literature right. But they put him in here just because he gets to introduce himself by saying, "Call me Ishmael," which everybody knows that line. Andrew, why is that line famous? It's the first line of Moby Dick. I know what it is. I know why it's famous, but like, why? I don't know the first line of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't know the first line of Tom Sawyer. I don't. There's nothing interesting about "Call me Ishmael." Why is that a famous line?
Because it's the first line of the book. I assume that's the only reason.
It's the first line of every book. Why is that one famous? I don't know why I'm expecting you to have this answer, but I've got to.
Chris, why are you being mean to me? I don't understand. I didn't write the script, man. I don't know. But no, there's also mentions of the Rue Morgue in this too, which is an Edgar Allan Poe story, where they try to kind of, because the Murders in the Rue Morgue is an interesting story because it's marked as one of the first instances of detective fiction, where the culprit turns out to be a monkey.
Spoilers
for a 125-year-old story, yes. And this movie kind of implies that Hyde is the one actually doing the murders in the Rue Morgue, because they say, there's been, when they're chasing him down, he's like, there's been a bunch of unsolved murders in the Rue Morgue, and I was like, but a monkey did them. And I guess
Hyde is kind of monkeyish. He's got those long arms in this interpretation.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, so there's definitely a lot of like literary references, jabs, interesting things, all sorts. Like, if you went through classic literature, you're gonna be Leo pointing at the screen a whole lot in this movie.
Speaking of Hyde's like introduction scene where they're chasing him down, like he said, he's one of her murders and stuff. He's dressed like you would expect Mr. Hyde to be dressed, because he clearly was wearing some kind of suit or tuxedo, but it's all ripped to shreds because he's all, really big and massive.
I think I know where you're going with this.
And he's got a top hat on, which is a lot of fun. They capture him, they catch him up in this net, and they pull him off. And then Tom Sawyer picks up that top hat, and it's huge. It's a giant top hat made for Hyde's head. So,
like, where did this come from?
The Dr. Jekyll, like, well, I want to look fashionable still whenever I transform. I'm going to order a giant top hat. I would love to see that conversation with the tailor. Just add 20 inches to my head circumference. Don't ask why.
Don't fix the suit. Don't fix the suit.
No.
The suit's fine. The suit rips. I get it. I understand. The hat, though, the hat needs to be perfect.
But how is he wearing it? Is he wearing it as Dr. Jekyll?
Maybe he just stashes it. So maybe Jekyll just has it to try to appease him. I don't know.
I want that backstory.
We're watching the movie wrong,
Oh,
Chris.
clearly. It was very funny, though.
Yeah, like he picks it up and he's like, "Whoa."
They don't shy away from the Invisible Man being naked, right? Because you can see
No.
his clothes, so if he's going to truly be invisible, he's got to be naked. So he's walking around many locations naked. They acknowledge it a few times. He talks about how cold it is in the snow and how it's affecting his appendages. I mean, there's a lot of jokes about it. And he sneaks up on Alan Quartermain on the boat, and that's where the line at the beginning of this episode came from. He yells at him because he got the drop on him, and he's like, "I want you dressed at all times, or it's my boot up your ass." It's just such a. Why would you ever have to tell somebody that? Like, God, stop being naked.
Like, yeah, it's pretty funny because, well, in one, it kind of shows that like Quartermain can like figure it out because I think it's like dark in his room or something when he does it, and like so he like can clearly like tell that he's there and he's able to grab him and throw him out, and so it's played for laughs. But yeah, it's definitely that dude's naked a lot.
He is on the ship. Like a good portion of this movie, especially in the middle, takes place on this massive ship. It's like the size of a city. Yeah. The dude has like a whole economy on there. He has to. But this is where we get our big reveal that M is actually the Phantom, and he literally lays out his entire evil plan on a record. Like he committed it to vinyl. It's a collector's item. And they play it on the ship, and he's doing like classic villain monologuing, breaking down why he got them all together. He's stealing resources from all of them, the blood of Dr. Harker, the
Mina's blood, the skin from the Invisible Man, Hyde's serum.
Right, he reveals that Dorian is his accomplice. And I really like visually what they do here, because while the record is playing, you get like these flashbacks to I guess him recording the record, but he's like talking directly to the camera, like in his study. And the footage is black and white. And he gets to really ham up being the bad guy, like talking directly to us, the audience. So I liked having that visual go along with the record playing. It was a cool little touch. It's a little, I don't want to say corny, but it's maybe campy, maybe a throwback to like the 30s adventure era of serials and film, and it was cool.
Yeah, it's a cool touch. It makes it a little bit more unique. Obviously, there's a subplot to that where they set a bunch of bombs on the Nautilus and they blow up and causes a bunch of problems.
But before they ignite those bombs, Dorian Gray says, "Bomb voyage," beating Pixar to it by like 10 years. Bomb voyage.
Myself. But also ultimately this leads us to our kind of big blowout finale where the League, surviving the attempted murder of them by M, who the whole reason M says he has no problem explaining his plan is because they're all about to die, because he doesn't expect them to be able to come together as a team and save themselves, which they kind of do. But this big finale gives us a lot of cool little showdowns. We get Mina versus Dorian, because the implication here is that they have worked together in the past. So there's some bad blood there, some potential spurned lovers, who knows? So they get to have a big draw-out fight where neither of them can technically be hurt.
It's very much the Wolverine versus Lady Deathstrike fight from X2.
Yeah. Like there's one, he even makes, like they both slash each other in the face and they both heal, and Dorian even says, "We'll be at this all day." So we get that cool showdown where they're both using, he's just invulnerable, but she's using her powers. We get Skinner and Tom Sawyer basically taking on now the evil Invisible Man. Nemo and Hyde are taking on Super Hyde. Basically one of M's guys drinks like a whole vat of Hyde
He's
serum.
Like pouring it on his face. I'm like, bold move, dude.
Like,
do you see what this stuff
he's
does?
Just like, it's like chug, 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 go, go, go. So he turns into this. He's definitely one of the weaker CG points of the film because he's full, but he's like monster.
I mean, he looks really strong, Andrew.
Yeah, he looks real strong. One thing I will say though is,
never mind. Let's move on.
God, dang it. One thing I will say for this is Hyde's transformations, especially that first transformation from Hyde back to Jekyll, it's very unsettling. Like some of the imagery they use and like the prosthetics they come up with for that transition makeup, almost body horror-esque of like watching this giant person like forcibly change back into a small person and vice versa. And then obviously the big moment of the fight, it's Moriarty versus Quartermain as they're kind of doing their fight as well. And everybody kind of gets a moment to shine. Obviously, everybody kind of gets a big hurrah moment as they kind of all kind of work together or forced to work together to survive. And it's a fun superhero finale where everybody kind of gets their big moment. And then ultimately, Quartermain does not survive.
Or does he? No, he does not. He is dead. He is in the ground. But the movie does end with the big tease for, I guess, a return, I guess a sequel, because he gets buried in Africa. And there is I don't know what we call it. They don't really say what he is. He's a shaman, a medicine.
A witch doctor.
A witch doctor. And because he's wearing a mask and the whole getup. And after everyone says their piece and walks away from his grave, he does some kind of dance and waves his staff around, and storm clouds form and lightning, and there's a rifle left on top of his grave, and the earth starts shaking, and we go to credits. Who knows what was going to happen next, Andrew?
The story and the kind of lore that Quartermain had mentioned once before is that a witch doctor had apparently blessed Quartermain for saving his village, promising that Africa would never let him die. That was that they mentioned that a couple of times in the film, that the idea that apparently natives within Africa had, whatever. So the implication by the ending there seems to be suggesting that they are living up to their end of the deal by not letting him die.
Your wife and kid be damned, but you're not going to die.
Yeah. I can only assume he saved them after they were gone. But yeah, it's definitely teasing something there. I can only assume it would have obviously been the return of Quartermain.
Sure, yeah.
Can
you imagine
assume that's what it was.
A sequel, LXG2, where he's like a zombie Quartermain?
The thing that would have been interesting to me is if they had tried to cast him younger, like he comes back, but he's suddenly younger, so they don't have to use Sean Connery again. Or like they tried to de-age Sean Connery in like 2005, and how badly that would have gone. But
well, if they go that route, there's still room for a sequel. Then if they're gonna recast him. Yeah,
apparently you can do that now.
Chris Pratt as Alan Quartermain.
Oh my god! Can't we at least get Bradley Cooper, please?
He could probably do the voice a lot better.
Yeah, but
Chris Pratt just sounds like Mario
or Garfield. But apparently Mario and Garfield are about to sound exactly the same. But yeah, obviously that I can only assume that was the tease there. Obviously this was the early 2000s. Every single superhero movie was supposed to be a franchise. So obviously I can only assume they were planning for more here. Obviously the movie ends with Nemo, Mina, Skinner, Jekyll, and Sawyer all still alive. So you've got a core team ready to go. Bring Quartermain back. Throw that in a pot. Broth, potato. Baby, you got a stew going.
I do like, you mentioned Jekyll and Hyde sort of learn to work together. I love how they represent that visually, because anytime Jekyll looks in a mirror, he sees Hyde looking back, and vice versa. And they sort of communicate with each other that way through a mirror. So you'll have like Hyde, and he needs to save everybody on the ship. So in the mirror, you have Jekyll like giving him a pep talk. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to put like a visual on that. I don't know. It's better than like having a voiceover or anything like that. It's cool being able to see both characters on screen at the same time.
There's a cool sequence where he's walking down a hallway and he's passing all these windows and all the doors. And like as he walks past them, you see like Jekyll comes in and out of each one. And again, it's just a cool visual. It's a great way to represent that. And it definitely shows that like they're always kind of there, but it gives that a much better representation and gives you it's a visual medium and give a visual piece of it. So no, that is very cool. I like that a lot.
That final Hyde monster, Jekyll monster, whatever you want to call it, that he has to fight. It is looking back, definitely a weaker point CG wise, because that is not practical. That is all CG, and man, 2003 and all CG character, we just weren't there yet. It ends up looking something like straight out of a video game, like maybe like a Resident Evil monster, or kind of like the Titan monsters from Batman Arkham Asylum. When they get all jacked up on Titan. Head's the same size, head's normal, but like there's like 28 back muscles that are just bulging out.
Got like a 48 pack going on his stomach there. Like, it's terrifying.
Now, Andrew, this brings us to the part of the show where I like to ask you, how does this movie function as an adaptation of the source material? The source material being the series of comics written by Alan Moore. Are you familiar with the books? Have you read them?
Yeah, I've read the first couple of volumes. I lost track of the more recent. I know I think they just did the final, what's supposed to be the final League of Extraordinary Gentlemen story. And there's been some spin-offs and stuff too. But those first few volumes that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, I definitely remember reading those and being a huge fan. I mean, it was definitely something that I definitely remember reading. And so there's definitely an awareness, and yeah.
Okay.
So if you're asking me how it functions as an adaptation,
yeah, that's the question.
It's
loose,
very loose. There are definitely some things here. In the comic, they are not recruited by M. They are recruited by a guy named Campion Bond, who, guess who he's related to?
Sean Connery.
And exactly. The first book is kind of more of the League gets caught in the middle of a kind of a gang war between what is essentially Fu Manchu and Professor Moriarty on the other side. So like obviously Moriarty is from the book. That's the thing they pulled in. They kind of eliminated the rivalry he had there and kind of switched it more towards he's just trying to start essentially a world war. So there's definitely DNA, but it really is more like, let's just take this concept and just do whatever we want with it, basically. It's definitely a different beast. The book is the book is much more adult. The book is much more, there's an edge to it. There's a lot, not a book I'd give to a child or even a teenager necessarily. So we're definitely making some adjustments to try to make this a franchise. Yeah, this very much feels like we got a concept and let's run with it. Let's just take it in a direction that we think kind of makes it a franchise. And yeah, every character is introduced differently. There's lots of different stuff. Like in the book, I think they find Quatermain high out of his mind in an opium den. Like it's that kind of stuff. Like yeah. So as an adaptation, it's definitely playing pretty loose with it.
I can understand why producers would be interested in the concept, but also be interested in toning it down a little bit and making it more of a PG-13 blockbuster, Andrew's mom could take the kids type movie. You're going to make more money that way. I totally get it. I can get why they make those changes. I can get why someone's a diehard of the originals might not be a big fan of the movie, but you know what? It is a cool ass concept. And especially from like a cost saving standpoint, because these are mostly public domain characters, but you've got these, what could be looked at as like the original superheroes of literature or something that predates superhero comics, and put them in a superhero comic book setting. It's a pretty genius concept. I get why they went for it. As for the movie itself, the action scenes are pretty cool. There are times when it is really delivering on that premise and that concept, and seeing these characters side by side using their abilities is pretty cool.
Pretty cool, yeah.
The movie, to me, struggles at times kind of link between those action set pieces to keep us invested in the characters throughout, but definitely the movie's almost 2 hours. You watch it beginning to end, you're going to find some stuff that you like. I mean, man, that Invisible Man stuff, if I haven't praised it enough already, that alone is worth the price of admission to me.
Man, the Invisible Man's got a pretty good track record on screen, honestly.
The new Invisible Man is pretty rad. It's the last movie I saw.
Pretty rad.
In the before times, and it was a hell of a way to go out. That does it for us this week. That does it for the talk on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. An interesting movie, to say the least. There's some pretty cool stuff in there. I hope we were able to highlight that. If you haven't seen it, I say it's worth checking out. I watched it on HBO Max. It's streaming. It's out there.
I agree.
And after you have watched the movie, or just watched Invisible Man clips on YouTube, head over to Apple Podcasts where you can leave a review for this show. And you know what? I ask you to go one step farther. Just leave a review for every podcast that you listen to regularly. All the shows are going to appreciate it. It helps so much with algorithms and shows getting discovered. And in the case of our show, I just like reading nice stuff about us. I'm going to be honest with you. And anytime you leave a review, we are going to read that review on the episode, just like this one left by Groffles, who says, authenticity, banter, and comics. BOTR, the perfect comic book movie podcast. Comics have had a renaissance with Marvel Studios, but that doesn't mean all of the movies reach the same critical highs. BOTR started off trying to find the good in those films critiqued by the public, and they succeed. I think we'd all rather have some comic book movie fatigue than go back to the days when they struggled to get the talent that they have now. But those movies also took chances to bring our passions to the screen. And this podcast does what cynical fans don't do. They look at the movie through its best moments. Getting a movie made is a feat of willpower. Emerald energy of willpower, you could say. And I'm glad we can celebrate them. As they sign off in the show, all movies have greatness. Please keep up the great podcasts and discussions.
We'll think about
it. I was ready to retire after this episode, go out like the man himself, but Groffles, we're going to keep going just for you, buddy.
Groffles is standing over your grave doing the dance, calling the storm.
I'm going to grab that rifle, emerge as Chris Pratt, and continue this podcast. Does that track? Does that make sense? I hope so. I think it's time to get out of here. Get out of here, Andrew. But yeah, before we go, though, your mom. Has your mom texted you? Have you heard back from your mom?
No, I have not.
Gosh. Well, I guess. Look, tune in next week, folks. I don't know what movie we'll be talking about, but surely by then, Andrew's mom will have responded, and we will keep you updated. In the meantime, please remember, maybe not all movies are great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, share it with your mom, and follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Would it be the turn? It's the end of the 19th century. Is that the turn of the 20th century or the turn of the 19th century? The turn of the 20th, right?
Why don't you just say the turn of the century?
Is that
because it's a different century? Yeah, because it's not the turn of this century.
Yeah, we've turned another century since then. At the dawn of the 20th century.
Sure. The genesis of the 20th century. But also notably passed on Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, or some Lord of the Rings role.
Also,
and lost himself.
Also notably passed on last year.
I hate you.
I get it.
But
I got that.
Man, the Invisible Man's got a pretty good track record on screen, honestly.
Ironic? Is that ironic?
From the original to the new one to I'm just saying,
But is it ironic that the Invisible Man has a good presence on? I don't know. I thought there was a joke there.
There is a joke there, and now I see it, and I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to be better. I'm sorry I let you down there.